Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do a review of a SMSL stack which consists of DO100 DAC and HO100 headphone amp. And I know that you have one question in your heads. Why is he wearing the exact same shirt as in the last video? And I assure you I'm not. I just have 6 of these because I buy my clothes as every real man should, in bulk. Let's start this review talking about the DAC, DO100. It costs $250 US, and it is based around Sabre DAC chip, actually 2 of them. That becomes like a trend. Everybody is using 2 DAC chips. I'll put that on the screen, and when it comes to connectivity, you can expect like a pretty normal standard set of inputs for this price point, which consists of coaxial, optical, and USB. 3 digital inputs. Oh, also you have a Bluetooth antenna, so you can connect wirelessly to this DAC too. That's neat. The only beef I have with its connectivity is actually the USB input that is in form of USB-C. Yeah, I know that's modern and small and convenient, but in audio gear that have enough space, I much prefer the big old chunky USB-B port, you know, that squared one, because it's more sturdy, easier to find blind when you're like trying to hook something up without looking. And finally, I just had to complain about something, so you don't think I'm paid for this review. Am I? Then, moving to the outputs, we have 2 analog sets. One is single-ended RCA, and the other one is balanced XLR. So that's basically it. You do get a remote with this unit. You can control volume on it, but if you're using it as a DAC only, I suggest you leave that option on at its max level, which will make it line output, and to control your volume on an amp, integrated amp, headphone amp, or whatever this DAC is connected to. Because most likely that will be the superior volume control compared to this one integrated in the DAC. So I don't want to stay here much and talk about things that are not important, so we are moving to the sound quality. And DO100 sounds pretty good for this price point. It has that typical SMSL warmth in the bass line, it has really decent punch and kick, but again, when you move to the mid-range and higher frequencies, those are detailed, and you do hear a lot of huskiness and a lot of tiny details and edges. Soundstage is quite decent, everything is precise and well layered, but the overall width and depth is nothing to write home about. It actually reminds me on every other SMSL or Topping DAC at this price point. It's quite similar. It's not better than any of those, but it's not inferior either, so I guess that's okay. And because I couldn't detect any character aside of that slightly warmer, punchier, beefier bass that I can complain about or I can talk much about, I quickly went on and compared this DAC to several of the other DACs that I already have and I already like. And the first one was Topping DX3 Pro Plus that I had as a loaner. That was the last review on this channel. That one is a 2-in-1 unit, but those units can often surprise you with their DAC output quality. I compared these two just to notice that in terms of details, soundstage, width and depth, I find them pretty much comparable. But SMSL DO100 sounds fuller and punchier in the bass, and that extends to the mid-bass too, which means that DO100 fills out vocals and instruments with more juice, and it sounds more correct with tone timbre than the X3 Pro Plus does. Everything else is comparable. I don't want to just repeat about details, high frequency, etc., etc. So you can think of DO100 as DX3 Pro Plus, with its biggest shortcoming mostly corrected by adding more bass weight and mid-bass especially, that bleeds into mids a little bit and adds touch of fullness and just heaviness to the mid-range. So the difference is not huge, it might not mean that much to everybody, but I definitely prefer the DO100 as a DAC to Topping DX3 Pro Plus. Another Toppings DAC that's a quite strong contender at this price point would be Topping E50. That's also standalone DAC, and I didn't have it for a direct comparison, but what I remember of E50, I think it sounds slightly leaner, not as punchy in the bass and mid-bass, and probably not as resolving as DO100, but E50 has some sort of natural smoothness that's really nice. But if I have to choose between DO100 and E50 in their default out-of-factory state, I would definitely go for DO100 for its slightly livelier, more dynamic, and slightly more detailed sound. E50 can come really close if you upgrade it with a linear power supply or just low noise power supply, but that costs more. So I think this is slightly better deal currently. So to cut this story short, I find that DO100 performs at pretty much the same level that some SMSL DACs costing $350 or $400 performed a year or 2 years ago. For example, SMSL SU9 and a lot of its variations, SU9N, SU8S, etc., etc. DO100 is basically at the same level. It has that same sound signature with really punchy dynamic bass line, but again, detailed high frequencies and precise instrument placement, but not particularly huge soundstage. It's just I'm feeling like I'm reviewing SU9 all over again. This also means that DO100 is not completely at the same level as the newer SMSL M500 MK2. That one is a better, fuller sounding, livelier sounding DAC, but it costs $200 more, and basically, yeah, it's a really good DAC for the asking price. But now let's move to the head amp, the HO100. As you can see, these two are meant to be a stack. They look the same, they're matched nicely, and the HO100 also has RCA analog inputs and XLR balanced inputs, so you can connect it either way with the O100. Oh my god, so many models and names, and I'm getting old and senile. But in my experience, these two sound pretty similar either way, so you can connect them with balanced connection, or you can use single-ended option. Both sound really great and with similar amount of details and dynamics and soundstage and everything. So even though with some DACs and some amps I can hear the difference and the improvement of using balanced connection, here, after volume matching, of course, because balanced is louder to begin with, I find these two at the same level. But you have the option, and options are always great. In the front, really simple command through switches on, off, then choosing RCA or XLR connection, and finally gain, low, medium, high. And the low one is really only for really sensitive in-ears, and I've tried several. I haven't experienced any hiss or anything like that. Then we have two outputs here. One is single-ended, that's the bigger one, 6.35 millimeters, and the other one is balanced 4.4 millimeters Pentacon. And I did balanced like this because it's just a 4.4 millimeters Pentacon that is used for balanced connection, But this actual output is actually just routed from the single-ended out. It's here for convenience, as the manufacturer explains, and it's not truly balanced. And I've noticed that because these two sound basically the same. The difference, and if you hear any difference, will come probably from different cables on your headphones. But there are no benefits of using one over the other. And when it comes to power, this amp has quite a bit of it. I'll put it on the screen. It measures in watts for low impedances and several hundred milliwatts for high impedance headphones, which is quite a lot. And it feels like a powerful amp, as it should, with that sort of power rating. And while I was testing it, I basically concluded very similar thing as for the DAC. It sounded well balanced, punchy, and it has decent weight in the bass line. It resolves quite a lot of details, and it's not overly bright, as some SMSL's headphone amps were in the past. I remember SH-6 resolving but thinned out was not my favorite, but this one, this have grunt, this have dynamics, it sounds pretty darn good. And I quickly moved on to comparing it to some of its closest competitors, because that's the meat of my reviews, comparing everything with everything. And I'm happy to report once again that the HO100 sounds better to my ears than Topping L30. That's at this point just surpassed by basically every newer headphone amp that I've tested recently. The HO100 sounds fuller, juicier, livelier, with more kick, with more body in the mid-range, and I just preferred it. So I quickly went on and compared it to another SMSL amp, slightly cheaper. This one is SH-6, that I also preferred for sounding fuller and juicier, a bit slightly less detailed than L30. The HO100 sounded more revealing in the high frequencies and offered more texture in the mid-range, in vocals, that huskiness and crunchiness. Transients are also slightly crisper, but the older SH-6 still sounds fuller and juicier in the bass and mid-bass. But if you carefully compare them, you'll probably notice that SH-6 is slightly warmer than it can be called neutral. It almost has slightly bloated mid-bass. It's very attractive, it sounds really nice, especially if you have thinner sounding DACs. And a lot of budget DACs are that way. For example, Topping E30 or Topping D10, etc, etc. If you have such detailed but clean sounding DAC, this small SMSL might be a really good pairing to actually cover some of the shortcomings of that DAC. But if you connect them to a better, fuller, punchier, more dynamic and livelier sounding DACs, then I think that the HO100 is slightly better balanced, more extended in the highs, and more revealing overall. Also, things that you have to consider is that smaller SH-6 is single-ended only. You have RCA inputs and you have 6.35 millimeters output, while the newer DH100 offers balanced connections on the input and fake balanced on the output. It costs just $30 more, so it's a pretty good deal. I think, generally speaking, it does sound a little bit better, but I just wanted to say that you might still prefer SH-6 if you are pairing it with an analytical, slightly drier, leaner sounding DAC. Next, I compared it to a really good hifi Zen Can. I reviewed this one just recently, and these two are really difficult to compare. So I leave the connectivity and features and controls, buttons, things like that to you. Go Google it, see the pictures for yourself, read the specs, so I can actually focus on the sound fidelity. Zen Can sounds slightly inferior to my ears if we are using single-ended 6.35mm output. In that case, SMSL DO100 is fuller, punchier, juicier sounding amp without actually losing any details. It still resolves quite a bit of details. They're tonally similar, but DH100 is just livelier and slightly punchier, where Zen Can is more sedated, kind of flatter sounding, and I enjoyed SMSL more. But things actually change if we move to balanced outputs, and hifi Zen Can has a true balanced output, and you notice that it's louder, you have more power, and it resolves more details. Soundstage widens and becomes a little bit deeper. Everything becomes kinda cleaner and with darker background, and separation improves. While moving on the balanced outputs on DH100 does nothing, because it's a convenient 4.4mm jack without actual balanced output. And in that case, Zen Can takes a lead. It sounds just slightly more resolving and more spacious, with a touch better control over bass notes. I would say that with Zen Can you get a decent single-ended output and great balanced output. With SMSL you get both of these located somewhere in between. It's better than hifi's single-ended output, livelier, fuller, more dynamic, but not better than hifi's balanced output that adds just a little bit more layering and separation and overall clarity into the mix. That's all the information I believe you should have to make the informed decision. Everything else you can see for yourself. Form factor, looks, connectivity, different types of options they have, so decide according to that. But if we are simply talking about sound fidelity, I would go for Zen Can if you know that you're going to use the balanced output, but I would go with DH100 SMSL if you know that you are going to be using single-ended output as well. And now, to finish this review, I'll talk about this stack as a whole. When joined together, it provides that same sound tonality and sound signature that I've talked about this whole review. Punchy bass, warmer sound signature, pretty nice and punchy mid bass that's warming mid-range just a bit and giving slight fullness to the vocals and every tone basically, but resolving highs, resolving mids, decent soundstage, but nothing really to write home about. And this stack costs $380 if my math is right. And if you're asking, can I buy anything better, any better stack for this amount of money? Well, not that I've heard of. The only way that I'm seeing here as a slight improvement in terms of sound fidelity without spending much more would be going with something such as Topping DX5. It's a 2-in-1 unit, a DAC and an amp, really mighty good too, and it does sound a little bit fuller and juicier with vocals. It has slightly richer timbre in the mid-range. If we are talking about the bass only, the deep bass, both are equally punchy and warm, but in the mid-range, in the actual mid-range, where vocals are and like acoustic instruments, guitars, cello, things like that, Topping DX5 still produces fuller bodied tones that sound more realistic to me. And that's basically the only difference. Everything else seems quite comparable dynamics, kick, high frequency details, soundstage, but DX5 creates tones that are slightly more palpable and in a way a little bit more contrasty. It feels like maybe it separates the background, the dark background, from tones and outlines of those tones slightly better than this DAC is doing. And yeah, it's like some $70 more expensive. It's 2-in-1 unit, so you cannot play with it and change DACs and amps separately, but it brings something that might be worthwhile considering it. And finally, I know that a lot of you would ask this, if we are talking about SMSL's own M500 MK2, that's also 440, same as Topping DX5, I find that to be an astonishing DAC. If you need a DAC only, it has my full recommendation. I even like it more than Topping DX5. I like it more than SMSL DO100, but it is $200 more expensive. But if you need it for your headphones, the head amp part of M500 MK2 is the one holding it back, holding it down. It's on the dry side, kinda, it doesn't have enough fullness and lushness and liveliness for me to fully recommend it. The DAC part does, but the amp part is the dry and analytical sounding one. And in that case, if you actually need that unit for headphones, I give an edge to this stack. So that would be all for today, guys. I leave the links for both SMSL stack and Grade DX5 down below the video, and they will lead you to Aoshida Audio Store, that are the nice guys that sent me this stack in for a review. And for you paranoid bunch out there, don't worry, those are not affiliate links. It's just a way to say thanks to a store that sent this in for a review. But I do have affiliate links in some videos. And then I lie through my teeth to make you buy the product. But you don't know when and where I put affiliate links. I'm gonna get you. So that would be all for today, guys. I hope you like this video. If you do, click that button, subscribe, comment down below the video, and see you next time. Bye.